G'day traders, we're going to wrap up of Tuesday the 28th of August. So we've got the daily charts here. It's a very similar situation as to what was previously talked about, and that's this market trying to get some downward pressure. It's using this high, or this previous high over here, as resistance. It got above it, came back through underneath it. It's now using as resistance. Got this little swing low marked in down here to see if it ever wants to come down and test that. It'd be interesting to see what it gets. What happens if it starts coming down there. There'll be certainly some pressure applied to the downside if that was to happen. As far as providing a little bit of a closer look, here's the 15-minute chart. This trend line is really having a significant play on this market at the moment. It started all the way back here. Once we had this little bit of area here, I drew it in there. Sort of, you can see we've touched it quite a few times and used it as a resistance. But then we've come back, used it as a support many times, and this has really confirmed it as quite a strong support area in the market. And you can see, even though that over the last few days the market's been getting some downward pressure, there's been periods here in this overall up market where the market's been certainly trying to push down. But in saying that, today, let me kind of zoom in a bit here. So here's today's action here, but it's very handy to have something like this and seeing overall support and resistance areas and trend lines and things like that. Seeing the market come down almost to the tick, get a bounce off that area, and then really start coming up. And overall, it was a day that the market tried to push higher, and that certainly came about from this market getting a bounce off that trend line. So certainly saw that happening, and it's just a good way to provide some overall direction with medium-term markets. So it gives a little bit more than those daily charts, but of course it's not as noisy or as volatile as, say, something we look at when we're on the 5-minute and the 1-minute charts. So here we are, as far as sort of closer price action and what happened today. This market here, right at the beginning of the day, and I'll go through a few things. I've marked a few things, I do a little bit of a blog each day just for myself. I just go through and recap the day and of my certain strategies, and it's something that I look at as far as my way of interpreting the first sort of half an hour to 60 minutes of the action. So I'll get to that on the 1-minute chart, but here, sort of, the market, it tried to head up. It sort of faked that way, and then it came down. It got some real strength on the downside. Started getting through some levels on the downside here, but then it's quickly turned back around, and eventually it's picked quite a strong direction here. We started pushing up. There was quite a good key level in the market at 1408. It was the gap also. The market's pushed through the gap, so quite a strong momentum there. And look for it, potentially to come back and get a bounce off the gap. So eventually it's come up here. It's come back. It's got a bounce after putting a little bit of pressure and coming through the gap there. Eventually it's pushed through and then used the gap as support to push high, and you can see the 5-minute buy came up right in that area too. So as far as the 5-minute opportunity, this is a good one. Obviously, overall momentum's on the upside. You can see very clear trend on the upside, a pullback, the market then getting back above a key level, so that's going to provide support and an opportunity for it to push higher, which is what it did. It tried to get back up to those highs and have a look around there. And overall the momentum was just always, until this market got below 1408, which with some sort of pressure and some sort of momentum, you'd never really expect the sellers to come in and be in control on that, and that's exactly how it played out. So we've got another little area here. Technically the moving average is quite flat, almost pointing down, so I suppose you'd have to look at it as a 5-minute fade, but again, because of the area getting support above the gap, just one to be very careful of. It did push down for a while there, but eventually it came down and popped back up, and then same sort of thing. It was just trending between, say, the gap and this bit of what seems like quite a strong resistance at, say, around 1411. You can see the markets come up and hit these highs 4 or 5 times. This one here certainly looked like it was ready to go. It's had a shallow pullback. It's approached the highs again. All the other marks were right there pushing higher. The Russell was really breaking through the upside. It certainly got some momentum. Quite a strong green candle here on the 1-minute charts. It started really breaking up through these previous little highs here, but then almost on a dime just turned straight back around and came rushing back towards the gap. So quite a bizarre day where it just didn't have the momentum to break through on the upside. The indication was there after getting a bounce off the trend line back here. And it just kept on having a go, and when it has that many goes, there's a reason for it looks like the buyers are building momentum, but they could never do it, and there was sort of this real battle between trying to break higher and resistance there, and then the support of the gap at 1408. So quite an interesting afternoon. So 1 minute chart. So what I got here is, and many people speak about different ways of taking the first trend, or sorry, the first trade of the day. You know, some people might take it as a power point, they might take a power fade, they might take a terminator. You know, there's all sorts of different ways of approaching it. I think there's many great ways to approach it. There's no right or wrong way. The only thing I'd say is, as long as you have a very systematic approach and be doing the same thing consistently, and then sort of you can backtest that and create a management strategy around that, then of course you can create something that's going to be profitable. And you know, when you're just dealing with this first hour of the day, it's always, you know, most of the time, 9 times out of 10 or more, there's going to be certainly some good movement. And I guess it's a compact strategy too. You can be in and out and really get something done within this first hour of the day. For me, you know, I base a lot of my strategies or a lot of my trades on support of other markets. So really looking for markets to be all heading in the same direction, so momentum or volume and direction. And I get that indication from what other markets are doing, especially the Russell and the Nasdaq. So what I do is I call these little markers here pivotal points. Okay, so the market's come down, it's popped back up. So what I'll do is I'll come down, mark this here, and say this is a significant area of the market. If it comes back at it and looks to push through, I'm prepared to take a sell. But not only has it got to come down and test the area, I've got to see all the other markets coming down and breaking that same spot. So what you can do is you can go look at Russell and Nasdaq, mark this same pivotal point, and see that, you know, by the time if the ES came down, and you can already see the Russell and the Nasdaq, for example, already pushing through. So if there's momentum and support from the other markets, they'll break first. Being small indices, they tend to move a lot more swiftly, and they'll get through levels a lot quicker most times if it's going to go. Okay, so that's why for me, you know, using other markets is a very important part of my strategy. So I've marked a point here. Obviously, the market's never come back there, so we move on from that. We've come up here, opposite direction. We've come back quite significantly. So again, this is a very key level in the marketplace. So look for it to come up. This particular point here, well, I'm watching the other markets. All the other markets were there, but none of them are actually physically breaking. So this one didn't interest me so much, even though it's gone, what's that, about 9 ticks. There wasn't complete market support there, and maybe that in the end is why it turned around. But then this one here, so you can see, and I like this one because this is an area where the market looked like it's starting to head up. It should have headed up, and all of a sudden it turns around, starts breaking back down through sort of this 1407 level. So that's a real change in momentum, change in direction. Of course, you'll get that in this overall first sort of hour of the day. So it leaves a little pivot there again, pops back up. Market, if all the other markets come rushing through this pivot and breaking before the ES does, then again interested in it. And this one here, definitely the case. All the other markets are breaking through, and that's what's gave it the momentum to go, you know, 3.5 points through that particular area. Of course, also the other thing to be careful of is news announcements and things that can affect this area as well. But like I said, it's very important to be systematic in the way that you approach it. So anyway, from there, you know, that's just 1 hour of the day basically. You can either, you know, leave it or look at it. You know, some people, you know, I know when I first started trading, it was certainly an area that I just left. I just didn't want to be a part of it. Just believed it was too much out of control and not worth looking at. But like I said, if you can find some way to approach it, it's definitely worth having a look at that. But it's certainly not for everyone, and you've got to find something that suits your personality. You know, using other markets or pivot points, things like that's not for everyone. I know that. But find your spin on it if you do want to look at that sort of region. Anyway, the market's pushed down here. We started really breaking down through some levels here. It's possibly an area where it could have got some momentum on the downside. This area here, but like I said, this is where this market bounced off that 15-minute chart that we brought up before. You know, that trend line that's coming running down through here. So all of a sudden you see the market's pushing up through this, and I can see it bouncing off a key trend line on the 15-minute charts. Well, then that gives it some real strength and momentum on the upside. It's pushed up through here. Here's this sort of gap region. You can see it's pushed up through there with a lot of power, a lot of momentum. So definitely an area where it's possibly looking then to use the support and go higher from. And this is where it's come back, tested that support. Eventually, it's found some. It's got back through it, used it as support, and this is where it's really pushed higher. And then from here, this is the start of the afternoon period where we just sort of kept hovering between the highs, or sorry, this resistance of 1411 region and the gap, and the market just looked like it's just going nowhere. It's just between areas basically. So we pull back here. We've tried to go higher. We've come back. We're sort of rushing through this. So this is the same sort of thing here. This is a bit of a pivotal point. This is an area where the market's trying to go higher again. It's got a rejection. It hasn't been able to go higher. So when it comes down here with some power, and if you see all the other markets breaking this area, quite often, more times than not, there's certainly some momentum to keep on pushing down. But in this particular case, the gap, I guess, was holding to support. It looked like it was ready to go here. So it happened slowly, building momentum, and then all of a sudden, boom, bounce off the gap again. You can see price action is still quite tight, but even within tight price action, there's still a fair bit going on. If you've got some key levels drawn in the market and you're really watching what the market's doing around these key levels. From there, it's pushed up higher. Again, it's tried to go higher. It's got a shallow pullback this time and had a real go, and all the other marks are breaking. The Russell was really starting to push higher. So this is an area where I thought, this is going to be it. It's going to be a way in on the upside, and it's probably going to jump up to say 14, 15 in a heartbeat. But bizarre day that just, even though this is the fifth time having a go, it just couldn't do it. Again, sharp rejection straight back to the gap to where we finished the day. So quite interesting to say the least, but certainly still lots going on there. And moral of the story, or key to the story, is I keep on kind of harping on it. It's just have a systematic way to approach the market. Many different things work in this marketplace. As long as you keep on doing the same thing day in, day out, and keep on turning up and doing that thing, and building confidence in that systematic approach and habits around that, that's the real key to moving ahead and getting some sort of success. So that's the wrap up for Tuesday, and we're back on Wednesday.